The next exhortation that Paul has for us in 1 Thessalonians 5 is verse 18. Give thanks in all circumstances. And as you're seeing, as we're going through these little exhortations together, they really fit together like puzzle pieces. Rejoice always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances. Paul is building out what it looks like to live this faithful Christian life in joy and communion with Him, and then it spills out into this type of gratitude. Gratitude, thankfulness, here we are on Gratitude Sunday. It's a very appropriate theme for Thanksgiving week, isn't it? Maybe you have a tradition with your family, like we do with ours, to gather around the Thanksgiving table on Thursday, and everybody kind of goes around and tells maybe a couple of things that they've been particularly thankful for over the last year. I really don't think that's a distinctly Christian practice, but perhaps it's just an American Thanksgiving practice to notice what's going on in your life and to be grateful for it. But what Paul is talking about here in 1 Thessalonians 5:18 is a distinctive Christian type of thankfulness and gratitude. Because he says, be thankful in all circumstances. Give thanks in all circumstances. And so when people are gathered around their Thanksgiving table on Thursday who are not believers, they may not be noticing the hard parts of their lives that God is using for their good, that God is using for His own glory in their lives. And what I want you to see here is this beauty and this distinction that Paul really gives us in a small preposition. He says, give thanks in all circumstances. And the way that I want us to kind of talk about this really briefly this morning is with my box here. Now, I don't know what situation you are bringing this week, sitting in your pew, or what you're going to bring to the Thanksgiving table this week. I don't know what circumstances you have been dealing with. I don't know what suffering, what diagnosis, what disease, what pain of death, that vacuum in your soul that can seem to just suck you dry. I don't know what sorrows may have threatened to consume you this year. But I want you to think of that as kind of your circumstances. And here's what's unique about Christian gratitude, is that Christian thankfulness is not dependent upon our circumstances or our season, but it's born from the Spirit, and it's rooted in hope. So your circumstances, your situation may be quite heavy, but God doesn't necessarily tell us, Paul is not commanding us in this passage to be thankful for our circumstances. You don't have to be thankful that the person who you deeply loved has passed away and is not at the table this year. You don't have to necessarily be thankful that you are suffering from a progressively horrible diagnosis and disease. You don't have to be thankful for your disability. You don't have to be thankful for the discouragement in your life. But what God does call us to do in this passage is to be thankful in it. We don't have to necessarily be thankful for our suffering, and yet we can choose to stand 2 feet flat in our circumstances and be grateful in them. This is a distinctive Christian gratitude, to be grateful in our circumstances, even if we are not grateful for them. You may have read the book, The Hiding Place, written by Corrie ten Boom. It's her memoir, her story. And one particularly poignant part is she and her sister Betsy, the ten Boom sisters, were from outside of Amsterdam. And they and their family hid about 800 Jews and other political targets from the Nazi regime. They were Christians, eventually discovered, and they were sent to the Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany. And as Betsy and Corrie enter these horribly filthy barracks with just deeply suffering women, so much pain around them, they get into these barracks, and Betsy says, Corrie, the Lord has brought 1 Thessalonians 5:18 to mind here. What can we do to observe thankfulness even in this place, not for this place, not for the concentration camp, not for the death, not for the pain, not for the suffering around them, but in this place, how can we be thankful? So they start being thankful that God has put them in the concentration camp together. They're thankful that God has allowed them, that they weren't searched, that they were able to smuggle in a Bible and a little vial of medicine. And then Betsy says, I'm also thankful that these barracks are infested with fleas. And Corey says, fleas? Betsy, I'm not thankful for the fleas. My body is covered in these bites. We are all suffering because of these fleas. And Betsy says, no, it is because of those fleas the guards are not able to enter these barracks, because as annoyed as we are by these bites, they don't want them either. We have to come in here, and they're choosing not to because of the fleas. And so because of these fleas, we're able to have Bible study with these women, encourage one another, pray for one another in our terrible circumstances. So Betsy and Corey gave thanks to God for the fleas in the midst of their suffering circumstances. We have opportunity to cultivate gratitude in our heart, and it's really a snowball effect. God has wired our brains in such a way that as we practice gratitude, we see more things for which to be grateful. As we are thankful in our circumstances, we begin to notice more things that we can give God praise for. The inverse is also true. It really goes back to Genesis 3 and the lie that Satan originally told Adam and Eve. When we begin to believe that we are not enough, that we don't have enough, that God has forgotten us, abandoned us, left us alone, we begin to focus on the thing that we don't have, the thing that has left us longing. And like Eve, instead of looking at the hundreds of trees, at all of the fruit God has provided for them, we become fixated on the one thing that we don't. Friends, I think that God is calling us to a posture of turning, to see what we may be grateful for in every season and circumstance. Because maybe your circumstance is not an obstacle to God, but instead a vehicle of transformation. How can God move you in your circumstance for your own transformation? He shows us that thankfulness really is a product of the Spirit. Galatians 5, remember? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Thankfulness is in that list. This gratitude is a product of the work of the Spirit in our lives. And He uses it. He uses thankfulness to change us in the midst of our circumstances. I'm reminded of Romans chapter 5, verses 3 and 4. He talks about this transformation. He says, your suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and that hope will not put us to shame. That hope will not put us to shame because it is a sure and certain hope that we have in Christ Jesus, that when our King returns, everything broken will be restored. Every tear will be wiped away. Everything sad will come untrue. Everything will be made new in Christ. This is our great hope. This is a hope that is sure and steady and secure, regardless of our circumstances, seasons, situations, and suffering. This is a hope that is worthy of our thanksgiving today and every day.